The mine was working 3 shifts a day, 6 days a week. Soon after the crash, the mine worked only 8 hours a day and only 3 days a week. Coal was hard to sell. The steel mills and factories were closing down. Fine slack coal would sit in the railroad cars for weeks before it was taken away. Winter came, and it was a bad winter. Lots of snow and zero coal. I helped the mechanics in the machine shop take the batteries out of gathering motors and clean them. This was night work. These motors were used where there was no electric trolley lines in the mine. In cleaning these large batteries, it was dangerous to being burned by acid. We would cover our hands and faces with petroleum jelly. We would empty the acid out of the batteries, wash them with vinegar, and remove the old paint, repaint them, and fill them with acid. We would finish about 4 a.m. in the morning. Clean the jelly off with soap and vinegar. Change shoes and clothes. They stunk of acid. It was warm in where we worked, a big pot belly stove, red hot, filled with coal, prevented the zero air from getting inside. I started for home across the bottomland and up the hill through town. Snow on the ice made it hard to walk uphill. When I came to our house, the lights were on. Gladys was up and waiting for me with that big smile. Gladys always gave her best. She helped me take off my gloves. My hands were almost froze, next to heavy coat and shoes. She had the coal fire and the pot-belly stove red hot. I sat down. She gave me hot coffee. Soon she had biscuits baked in the cook stove and served me a hot lunch. We were glad when spring came and warm sunshine. Gladys said, "Soon blackberries will be right, and I want some." Weeks passed, and Lemoyne and his mother went blackberry picking, 2 small buckets filled with berries. Gladys said the berry patch was full of copperhead snakes. We picked around the snakes. Now we would have berry jelly and good blackberry pies. Not far from the Crown Mine was a flying field. Most of the time it was a cow pasture. On holidays and Sundays, Lyle Scott would fly in from Ohio, and the cow pasture would become a flying field. On holidays, Scotty would bring 2 or 3 planes to carry passengers. $2 a trip, 2 passengers at a time. The old World War I Jennies, with their 5 OX-5 motors, were real flying machines. Not many people ever flew in those days, and to fly was really something for the brave. Scotty agreed to teach me to fly for $25 per hour. I always liked airplanes, and this was my chance to fly. Soon I was flying the old Jennies. I liked to hear the wind whistle through the wires on the wings. The plane was framed of wood covered with cloth and dope. There were no brakes on the wheels. You just hit the ground and run till you stopped. You could gun the motor and turn around, or someone could hold one wing and turn you around. But once in the air, she was a real flying machine. We was laying on the ground by the plane one night. The full moon was coming up over the mountains when a man, Jess Arnold, that lived at the field, came out with a paper, the Police Gazette. He read about a flying fool Linenberg, about to grab a ham sandwich and start across the Atlantic Ocean for Paris, France. Scotty got a pencil and paper and started to figure if he would take everything off his plane and put on gas tanks, well, he could get halfway across the ocean. So that killed that idea. Scotty taught me to pack a parachute. The chutes we used were packed in a round bag and tied on the end of the wing. We would walk out the wing on the spar, being careful not to break the cloth. I wore a wide belt with 2 straps fastened to it. When I walked out on the wing, I would take a drawstring off a rope off the top of the bag The chute had a large ring fastened to the shroud lines. I would snap the straps on the ring and jump. When the chute opened, it would jerk the ring out of my hands. Landing was the uncertain part. If you was lucky, you would miss the treetops. In 1929, we started Scotty's Flying Circus, showing at fairgrounds and having our own shows on holidays and Sundays. I still worked for the coal company. The 30th day of May, 1929, we showed at Arnottsville. 4 planes carrying passengers, stunt flying, wing walking, jumping. We even had a 50-piece brass band, motorcycle jumping and hill climb. A beautiful day. Hundreds of cases of pop sold, and the lunch stand did a big business. Everyone was so happy. We carried hundreds of people for their first time up. We enjoyed a good summer. Then winter again, cold and snow. The mine only working part-time. I was glad when summer came again. I started to work on a big show for the 30th of May at Arnottsville. I was the show manager. This was the biggest flying circus ever given in West Virginia. Advertisement everywhere, newspapers, radio, tens of thousands of bills dropped from planes flying low over the cities. Scotty's Flying Circus was coming the 30th of May, 1930. The Depression was coming fast too now. Not much work. I hoped to make the people happy and forget their troubles. I would try. Gladys made hundreds of bottles of root beer. She ran a pop stand. The evening before show day, Gladys was in the stand getting ready for the big day. A state trooper asked Gladys to make him a hot dog sandwich with horseradish on it. Gladys made the sandwich and told him, "That horseradish is stinging hot. You put it on." "Ho, ho, ho. Tut, tut, little girl. I was eating horseradish before you was born," he said. He put it on, took a big bite. The tears rolled down his cheeks. He jumped over the stand, up to a 5-gallon can of water and drank, wiping the tears away. He said, "Why didn't you tell me that was cow turnip?" The hundreds of people roared and laughed. It was Heinz horseradish, not cow turnip. It was the 30th day of May, 1930. We had our last flying circus. We tried to give the people what they needed to forget the Depression that was coming so fast. The air show with all of its displays of fireworks all day long, beautiful displays of flags and many designs come down from the sky on small parachutes, wing walking, heavy bombs blasting in the sky, bands played on the ground. There was a greasy pole climb for the boys. 2,000 people chased greasy pigs. If you caught one, he was your pig. Motorcycle jumping, hill climbs for motorcycles. I made 5 parachute drops hanging by my toes on a flying trapeze. We went all out to make people happy. It was almost dark when I made my last drop. On landing, I lit on a barbed wire fence post and was paralyzed from my hips down. Some men taken me home and laid me on the bed beside the window. The doctor came from Fairmont, West Virginia. He said he heard I was killed. I jumped in my car and come as fast as I could, he said. I did not believe you was hurt that bad. The doctor packed me in ice. It was dark now. My little boy Lemoyne came running in and said, "Look, Daddy, Scotty's plane is on fire." I looked out the window. It was light as day. Scotty was making his last trip up for the day. Large candles were lit up on both wings, thousands of candle power of light. It was beautiful. Scotty told me how he was blinded one time with these candles. So tonight I will not look out, keep my head down and fly. As I looked, Scotty pulled back on the stick and up and over a beautiful loop. Then something happened. He fell forward on the stick. Down, down, down. The plane shot from the sky. Then crash. Scotty was dead. A young flyer named Ironholt from Ohio was killed with Scotty. That was the end of Scotty's Flying Circus. Gladys was always ready and willing. She was one I could depend on. She gave me the best of care. One day she said, "Do you know, it was 6 months today you went to bed." I was sitting on the side of the bed for the first time. By Christmas, God gave me strength to walk. A man, Roy Geho, my helper at the mine, was taking care of my work and did a good job. We had a happy Christmas. All the children were well. Gladys was really good keeping the children well. While I was hurt, Gladys gave birth to our 7th child. On September the 23rd, 1930, Gladys named the new baby girl Vivian Jacqueline. We called her Jackie. Like the other babies, she was a beautiful baby. Marjorie was 9 years old now and a big help to Gladys. Marjorie would go to the store and bring home small groceries and leave a store order to be delivered. The coal company gave us unlimited credit at the store. That was a big help. I soon was back at work. I paid the store every week until the bill was paid in full. The depression came fast. Coal was hard to sell. The mine only working 3 days a week. All other mines were closed. Everything was slowing down. Coal cars loaded with slack coal would sit on the railroad siding for weeks, no place to go. The company owned a large 2-story house. It was on the property when the company bought the land. Glenn Work, a bookkeeper, lived in this house with Mrs. Work and children. When the president of the company or vice president came to the mine, they stayed here. I received orders to paint the house. 2 men started working on the house, removing the old paint, and I started to paint the house. One day the vice president of the company was having lunch in the dining room with the mine superintendent. I was painting around a window where they were eating. The window was open. I could hear the talking. I did not know what they were talking about until they started shouting at each other. I heard Earl Leadbeater, the mine superintendent, tell Lou Evans, the company vice president, "That mine is hot. It's going to blow up and kill the men. The dust is up to the top of the rails. It's hot." A few loud words, and Mr. Leadbeater said, "I quit." Lou Evans shouted, "You can't quit. You're under contract." Mr. Leadbeater hollered back, "My contract does not say I must kill coal miners." That was the end of the talk. Mr. Leadbeater walked down to the mine office and picked up everything that was his and went home and never returned. A few days passed. He moved his family to Morgantown. The mine foreman was in the hospital from a mine accident. Now there was no head fire bosses and section foremen. I went home and told Gladys about the racket. Gladys said, "I hope it don't blow up and kill anyone." We never told anyone about what I heard that day. A few months later, the night watchman came to our house about 1 a.m. in the morning. He said he called the bookkeeper and told him the shifter bringing empty cars and taking out the loaded cars broke a rail. The timekeeper told me to come and get you to look at it. If necessary, he would call the railroad company to send out a track crew. I told the watchman I would be right down. Gladys gave me a hot cup of coffee to wake me up. Down the hill through the town I went and started to the railroad. When this same watchman came running, out of breath, he said, "The mine blew up. Do you know how to turn the electric power off inside of the mine and let the fan run?" Now, Mr. Wilson, the head electrician, lived a few feet from where we met. "You go get Wilson. That is his job," I told him. And I went on to the railroad, found the broken rail, and decided to put in a new rail. With the help of a man that came along, we rolled a new rail in the saw to cut it off. I just started the saw when Wilson came in. He said, "Robbie, let the railroad go." I was halfway down the slope when I run into smoke and heat. The doors have blown down. The men in there are dead. but there's always a chance to save them. I run to the office phone, called Glenn Work, the timekeeper, to hurry down to the mine. He called for state help, for doctors, ambulances, police. I read the notice on the wall, what to do in case of an explosion. I run to the store manager's house. He loaded the wagon with hammers, nails, bars, saws, and brung them to the mine. I run the battery motor with cars and loaded mine posts, crossbars, British cloth, British lumber, and everything needed for the rescue. The state rescue team came, and the hoist engineer pulled all the cars I had loaded up on the tipple, ready to send them down the slope. I soon had lots of help. We roped off the mine to keep people back. The mine could blow up again. Women and children were crying. The Red Cross came with hot coffee and sandwiches for the rescue men. 13 dead coal miners came up the slope covered with brown cloth on coal cars. Slowly the hoist engineers let the cars down the yard, and 13 dead men were taken away. I had forgot about Gladys and the children. When I come home, everyone was quiet. Gladys explained to Marjorie and Lemoyne what had happened. We sat down to supper. No one was hungry. Gladys looked at me. I knew what she was thinking. Mr. Leadbeater, the mine superintendent, was right. Soon the mine was cleaned up and rock dusted. The miners went back to work loading coal cars by hand with shovels. The once happy employees were not the same. It was like a creeping sickness. The depression came on like a giant monster, destroying everything and everybody. Steel mills and factories laid off their employees and closed down, locked the gates. The Crown mine closed, never to work again. Rivers of water filled the mine, 100 miles of steel rails, tons of copper wire machines, $1 million lost forever, all because a few men destroyed the medium exchange, money, gold, and silver. The worry of taking care of a family always falls on the mother. Gladys somehow must keep life and 6 children, the oldest 9 years old. I lost little time going to work on a moving van, and one of our first jobs was to move Earl Leadbeater, the man that quit the Crown Coal Company. We moved all his furniture from Morgantown to New York to Buffalo. Our next job was moving furniture for state police. The state of West Virginia changed almost all police from one end of the state to the other. For weeks we were on the road. We would unload and load up in the same town. For weeks we traveled over the state. It was not pleasant to see what depressing the people of dollars would do. All coal mines were closed, factories closed, many of them never to work again. People moved by the thousands out of towns, whole families living in shacks built with Coca-Cola signs, anything they could find, where water run out of the mountains free, where they could live off fish and wildlife. Everywhere we went, we saw the same thing. After hundreds of miles on the moving van, I was back at the Crown mine at Arnottsville. Gladys and me talked what was best for us to do. We decided to move closer to Morgantown and try to find a way to feed the 6 children. We had little money, but plenty to eat. I was walking 7 miles to Morgantown to get parts for the Ford. I passed an old house along the Fairmont-Morgantown highway. It was empty. I went back and asked the people living close by who it belonged to. They told me it was the home place of a Mrs. Shaver. She lived in Westover, close to Morgantown. I walked the 4 miles to Westover and located Mrs. Shaver. I asked her if I could move my family in the house. We would clean it up. I could not pay rent until I could find work. I wanted to move closer to town where I could do small jobs. Mrs. Shafer was a kind, understanding woman. She told me not to worry about money. You just move in. Now the well has good water, and you will make out. I went on to Morgantown. found the pieces I needed to fix the Ford, and walked back to Arnottsville, 7 more miles. The next day I could hardly walk. I told Gladys about the house. She said, "Let's go." The man I helped on the moving van loaded everything we owned and moved us to Laurel Point, no charge. He wanted to help us. In this house, Gladys would die and live again. The Schaefer house, where we moved in, was built in the 18th century. The house was about 20 feet wide and 24 feet long, 2 stories, or should I say 1.5 stories. The second floor room was under a tin roof. A porch 6 feet wide was built the length of the house. The front of the house was about 40 feet from the concrete road. A kitchen 20 feet long was built on back of the house. Steps in the living room went upstairs to the bedroom. This stairway was about 30 inches wide. The treads of the steps were 16 inches on one end and only 3 inches on the other end. This made the stairs winding, not too hard to climb. Gladys made our bedroom in the upper room. We had a hard time moving the bed up the steps. The only light in the upper room was our oil lamp. Downstairs we had electric lights hanging from the ceiling, no switches or outlets. The children slept downstairs. The kitchen was large and plenty of room for the coal stove and dining table. A few feet back of the kitchen was a well where we got water. The well was dug by hand and lined with stones. Over the well was a frame well house with windlass. We would turn a crank and wind up a chain with a wood bucket full of water. This is where Gladys got water to cook, wash clothes, and bath. Now we were moved. It was necessary to get money, but how? I found a few boards and 2x4s and framed a stand like we had at the flying field. I still had the canvas to cover it. We filled the stand with pop, all flavors. Gladys put Coca-Cola signs around the counter board and set pop around. Gladys was in business now, selling pop, candy, cakes, apples, anything to make a penny. I got a job as carpenter on a new university high school. The job did not last long. They run out of money and closed the job. Someone gave Lemoyne a young dog, a German police dog. Lemoyne named the dog Rex. A few months later, Rex would stand on his hind feet and put his front feet on my shoulders. One day I come home, Gladys was all upset and excited. That dog must go. He pulled Lemoyne and Don over the hill, miles from home. A man found them and brought them home. That dog will hurt someone. I gave the dog away to a man on a farm. I suppose the boys hated to see Rex go, but they knew Mom was right. He was too big to have around little children. On the hill above where we lived was a farmer and his wife. They were old people. Their name was Snyders. They were godly people. Every Sunday they came down the hill in their car and went to church. Mr. Snyder was good to us. He brought Gladys milk and butter. One evening Gladys put the pop away in the stand and turned off the lights. She cooked us a good supper, hot biscuits, and we all sat down together and ate supper. A girl, Millie Moreland, from the Crown Mine, stopped at our place to stay a few days while her dad and Mom were moving. The radio was the only music we had now. Cowboy Lloyd would sing and play. Then we would change to KDKA for Amos and Andy. We told the children good night and went upstairs. Gladys told me all that happened that day. She sold a lot of pop. This evening was cool and damp. This that comes in the fall in the mountains. I never liked it. I followed Gladys up the stairs, carrying the oil lamp. The wick needed trimming. I got in bed, and Gladys blowed out the light and came to bed. It was only 8 o'clock, but had been dark about 3 hours. Now let me say, Gladys was not sick and had not been sick. She would deliver our 8th baby in a short time. We hugged each other and said good night. No matter how the day went, we always ended the day forgiving and forgetting. This night was no exception. Let me stop a few minutes. Does God want us to be sick? Does sickness begin in the head? Does thoughts of the yesterday, tomorrow, and today bring on sickness? You see in this book what killed Mrs. Robinson. You also see God makes it possible to live after this so-called death. Mrs. Robinson was blessed with a good brain, and being dead for 8 hours did no harm to her brain. So you see, a tiny blood clot that stopped the heart pump, stops breathing, is called death. Not one body in a million could not be repaired and live a normal life. We use the lives of people to burn cities, destroy, kill. I ask you, will God bless us with the knowledge to live hundreds of years? Mr. Preachers, rulers of the people, it's in your hand. Death in the upper room. About 5 a.m., I woke up scared. Cold shivers went over me. I shook like a leaf in a windstorm. Cold sweat run down my face. I laid my hand over on Gladys. She was cold and stiff. I jumped out of bed and lit the lamp, holding it over Gladys. What I saw was horrible. Gladys was dead. It was hard to tell what I saw. The eyes were sunken back into the skull. Only skin drawed over the face. All flesh was gone. Only skin and bones. The arms and hands were the skeleton. Only skin over the bones. How could Mrs. Robinson go to bed looking so good and now only a skeleton? I knew now man was not so learned, and there was a lot for him to learn. I called on God. Let me tell you why I called on God. When I was a boy in Morgantown, I would go to the Baptist Sunday School in the morning with my cousin, Max Fisher. Then Max would go with me to the M.E. Sunday School in the afternoon. In the Sunday School, we studied the teachings of Jesus.